Well, good morning, everybody, and happy Thursday, and welcome to day 20 of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Hope you're enjoying your week and enjoying the book, and let's go ahead and get started. All those times we were in that bathroom, and she was just 3 toilets away, said Ron bitterly at breakfast next day, and we could have asked her, and now. It had been hard enough trying to look for spiders, escaping their teachers long enough to sneak into a girl's bathroom. The girls' bathroom, moreover, right next to the scene of the first attack, was going to be almost impossible. But something happened in their first lesson, Transfiguration, that drove the Chamber of Secrets out of their mind for the first time in weeks. 10 minutes into the class, Professor McGonagall told them that their exams would start on the 1st of June, 1 week from today. Exams, howled Seamus Finnegan. We're still getting exams? There was a loud bang behind Harry as Neville Longbottom's wand slipped, vanishing one of the legs on his desk. Professor McGonagall restored it with a wave of her own wand and turned frowning to Seamus. The whole point of keeping the school open at this time is for you to receive your education, she said sternly. The exams will therefore take place as usual, and I trust you are all studying hard. Studying hard. It had never occurred to Harry that there would be these exams with the castle in this state. There was a great deal of mutinous muttering around the room, which made Professor McGonagall scowl even more darkly. Professor Dumbledore's instructions were to keep the school running as normally as possible, she said, and that, I need hardly point out, means finding out how much you have learned this year. Harry looked down at the pair of white rabbits he was supposed to be turning into slippers. What had he learned so far this year? He couldn't seem to think of anything that would be useful in an exam. Ron looked as though he'd just been told he had to go and live in the Forbidden Forest. Can you imagine me taking exams with this? He asked Harry, holding up his wand, which had started whistling loudly. 3 days before their first exam, Professor McGonagall made another announcement at breakfast. I have good news, she said, and the great hall, instead of falling silent, erupted. Dumbledore's coming back! Several people yelled joyfully. You've caught the hair of Slytherin! Squealed a girl at the Ravenclaw table. Quidditch maxes are back on! Roared Wood excitedly. When the hubbub had subsided, Professor McGonagall said, Professor Sprout has informed me that the mandrakes are ready for cutting at last. Tonight we will be able to revive those people who have been petrified. I need hardly remind you that one of them may well be able to tell us who or what attacked them. I am hopeful that this dreadful year will end with our catching the culprit. There was an explosion of cheering. Harry looked over at the Slytherin table and wasn't at all surprised to see that Draco Malfoy hadn't joined in. Ron, however, was looking happier than he had looked in days. It won't matter that we never asked Myrtle then, he said to Harry. Hermione probably will have all the answers when they wake her up. Mind you, she'll go crazy when they find out that exams are in 3 days' time. She hasn't studied. It might be kinder to leave her there until they're over. Just then Ginny Weasley came over and sat down next to Ron. She looked tense and nervous, and Harry noticed that her hands were twisting in her lap. What's up? Said Ron, helping himself to more porridge. Ginny didn't say anything, but glanced up and down the Gryffindor table with a scared look on her face that reminded Harry of someone, though he couldn't think who. Spit it out, said Ron, watching her. Harry suddenly realized who Ginny looked like. She was rocking backwards and forwards slightly in her chair, exactly like Dobby did when he was teetering on the edge of revealing forbidden information. I've got to tell you something, Ginny mumbled, carefully not looking at Harry. What is it? Said Harry. Ginny looked as though she couldn't find the right words. What? Said Ron. Ginny opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Harry leaned forward and spoke quietly so that only Ginny and Ron could hear him. Is it something about the Chamber of Secrets? Have you seen something? Someone acting oddly? Ginny drew a deep breath, and at that precise moment, Percy Weasley appeared, looking tired and wan. If you've finished eating, I'll take that seat, Ginny. I'm starving. I've only just come off patrol duty. Ginny jumped up as though her chair had just been electrified, gave Percy a fleeting, frightened look, and scampered away. Percy sat down and grabbed a mug from the center of the table. Percy, said Ron angrily, she was just about to tell us something important. Halfway through a gulp of tea, Percy choked. What sort of thing? He said, coughing. I just asked her if she'd seen anything odd, and she started to say, "Oh, that. That's nothing to do with the Chamber of Secrets," said Percy at once. "How do you know?" said Ron, his eyebrows raised. "Well, if you must know, Ginny walked in on me the other day when I was... Well, never mind. The point is she was spotted me doing something and I asked her not to mention it to anybody. I must say, I did think she'd keep her word. It's nothing really, I'd just rather..." Harry had never seen Percy look so uncomfortable. "What were you doing, Percy?" said Ron, grinning. "Go on, tell us. We won't laugh." Percy didn't smile back. "Pass me those rolls, Harry. I'm starving." Harry knew the whole mystery might be solved tomorrow without their help, but he wasn't about to pass up a chance to speak to Myrtle if it turned up, and to his delight it did, mid-morning when they were being led to History of Magic by Gilderoy Lockhart. Lockhart, who had so often assured them that all danger had passed only to prove to be wrong right away, was now wholeheartedly convinced that it was hardly worth the trouble to see them safely down the corridors. His hair wasn't as sleek as usual. It seemed he had been up most of the night, patrolling the fourth floor. "Mark my words," he said, ushering them around the corner. "The first words out of those poor petrified people's mouths will be, 'It was Hagrid.' Frankly, I'm astounded Professor McGonagall thinks all those security measures are necessary." "I agree, sir," said Harry, making Ron drop his books in surprise. "Thank you, Harry," said Lockhart graciously, while they waited for a long line of Hufflepuffs to pass. "I mean, we teachers have quite enough to be getting on with without walking students to classes and standing guard all night." "That's right," said Ron, catching on. "Why don't you leave us here, sir? We've only got one more corridor to go." "You know, Weasley, I think I will," said Lockhart. "I really should go and prepare my next class." And he hurried off. "Prepare his class," Ron sneered after him. "Gone to curl his hair, more likely." They let the rest of the Gryffindors draw ahead of them, then darted down a side passage and hurried off towards Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. But just as they were congratulating each other on their brilliant scheme, "Potter! Weasley! What are you doing?" It was Professor McGonagall, and her mouth was the thinnest of thin lines. We were," Ron stammered. "We were going to go and see..." "Hermione," said Harry. Ron and Professor McGonagall both looked at him. "We haven't seen her for ages, Professor," Harry went on hurriedly, treading on Ron's foot. "And we thought we'd sneak into the hospital wing, you know, and tell her the mandrakes are nearly ready and not to worry." Professor McGonagall was still staring at him, and for a moment Harry thought she was going to explode. But when she spoke, it was a strangely croaky voice. "Of course," she said, and Harry, amazed, saw a tear glistening in her beady eye. "Of course, I realize this has all been hardest on the friends of those who've been. I quite understand. Yes, Potter. Of course you may visit Miss Granger. I will inform Professor Binns when you've gone. Tell Madame Pomfrey I have given my permission." Harry and Ron walked away, hardly daring to believe that they'd avoided attention. As they turned the corner, they distinctly heard Professor McGonagall blow her nose. "That," said Ron fervently, "was the best story you've ever come up with." They had no choice now but to go to the hospital wing and tell Madame Pomfrey they had Professor McGonagall's permission to visit Hermione. Madame Pomfrey let them in, but reluctantly. "There's just no point in talking to a petrified person," she said, and they had to admit she had a point when they'd taken their seats next to Hermione. It was plain that Hermione didn't have the faintest inkling that she had visitors, and they might as well just tell their bedside cabinet not to worry for all the good it would do. "Wonder if she did see their attacker, though," said Ron, looking sadly at Hermione's rigid face, "because if he sneaked up on them at all, no one will ever know." But Harry wasn't looking at Hermione's face. He was more interested in her right hand. It lay clenched on top of the blankets, and bending closer he saw that a piece of paper was scrunched inside her fist. Making sure that Madame Pomfrey was nowhere near, he pointed this out to Ron. "Try and get it," Ron whispered, shifting his chair so he blocked Harry from Madame Pomfrey's view. It was no easy task. Hermione's hand was clamped so tightly around the paper that Harry was sure he was going to tear it. While Ron kept watch, he tugged and twisted, and at last, after several tense minutes, the paper came free. It was a page torn from a very old library book. Harry smoothed it out eagerly, and Ron leaned close to read it too. "Of the many fearsome beasts and monsters that roam our land, there is none more curious or more deadly than the basilisk, known also as the king of serpents. This snake, which may reach gigantic size and live many hundreds of years, is born from a chicken's egg, hatched beneath a toad. Its methods of killing are most wondrous, for aside from its deadly and venomous fangs, The basilisk has a murderous stare, and all who are fixed with the beam of its eyes shall suffer instant death. Spiders flee before the basilisk, for it is their mortal enemy, and the basilisk flees only from the crowing of the rooster, which is fatal to it. And beneath this, a single word had been written in a hand Harry recognized as Hermione's. Pipes. It was as though someone had just flicked a light on in his brain. Ron, he breathed. This is it. This is the answer. The monster in the chamber's a basilisk, a giant serpent. That's why I've been hearing the voice all over the place, and nobody else has heard it. It's because I understand Parseltongue. Harry looked up at the beds around him. The basilisk kills people by looking at them, but no one's died because no one's looked straight in the eye. Colin saw it through his camera. The basilisk burned up all the film inside it, but Colin just got petrified. Justin must have seen the basilisk through Nearly Headless Nick. Nick got the full blast of it, but he couldn't die again. And Hermione and that Ravenclaw prefect were found with a mirror next to them. Hermione had just realized the monster was a basilisk. I'll bet you anything she warned the first person she met to look around the corridors with a mirror first. And that girl pulled out her mirror and Ron's jaw had dropped. And Mrs. Norris, he whispered eagerly. Harry thought hard, picturing the scene of the night of Halloween. The water, he said slowly. The blood from Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. I'll bet you Mrs. Norris only saw the reflection. He scanned the page in his hand eagerly. The more he looked at it, the more it made sense. The crowing of the rooster is fatal to it, he read aloud. Hagrid's roosters were killed. The heir of Slytherin didn't want anyone near the castle once the chamber was open. Spiders flee before it? It all fits. But how's the giant basilisk been getting around in the first place, said Ron. A giant snake? Someone would have seen. Harry, however, pointed at the word Hermione had scribbled at the front of the page. Pipes, he said. Pipes. Ron, it's been using the plumbing. I've been hearing that voice inside the wall. Ron suddenly grabbed Harry's arm. The entrance to the Chamber of Secrets, he said hoarsely. What if it's a bathroom? What if it's in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, said Harry. They sat there, excitement coursing through them, hardly able to believe it. This means, said Harry, I can't be the only Parselmouth in the school. The heir of Slytherin's one, too. That's how he's been controlling the basilisk. What are we going to do, said Ron, whose eyes were flashing. Should we go straight to McGonagall? Let's go to the staff room, said Harry, jumping up. She'll be there in 10 minutes. It's nearly break. They ran downstairs, not wanting to be discovered hanging around another corridor. They went straight into the deserted staff room. It was a large, paneled room full of dark wooden chairs. Harry and Ron paced around it, too excited to sit down. But as the bell signal break never came. Instead, echoing through the corridors came Professor McGonagall's voice, magically magnified. All students to return to their house dormitories at once. All teachers return to the staff room immediately, please. Harry wheeled around to stare at Ron. Not another attack, not now. What'll we do, said Ron aghast. Go back to the dormitory? No, said Harry, glancing around. There was an ugly sort of wardrobe to the left, full of teachers' cloaks. In here, let's hear what it's about. Then we can tell them what we found out. They hid themselves inside it, listening to the rumble of hundreds of people moving overhead, and the staff room door banging open. From between the musty folds of the cloaks, they watched the teachers filtering into the room. Some of them were looking puzzled, others downright scared. Some of them... Then Professor McGonagall arrived. It has happened, she told the silent staff room. A student has been taken by the monster, right into the chamber itself. Professor Flitwick let out a squeal. Professor Sprout clapped her hands over her mouth. Snape gripped the back of the chair very hard and said, How can you be sure? The heir of Slytherin, said Professor McGonagall, who was very white, left another message, right underneath the first one. Her skeleton will lie in the chamber forever. Professor Flitwick burst into tears. Who is it? Said Madame Hooch, who had sunk weak-kneed into a chair. Which student? Ginny Weasley, said Professor McGonagall. Harry felt Ron slide silently down onto the wardrobe floor beside him. We shall have to send all the students home tomorrow, said Professor McGonagall. This is the end of Hogwarts, Dumbledore always said. The staff room door banged open again. For one wild moment, Harry was sure it would be Dumbledore. But it was Lockhart, and he was beaming. So sorry, dozed off. What have I missed? He didn't seem to notice that the other teachers were looking at him with something remarkably like hatred. Snape stepped forward. Just the man, he said, the very man. A girl has been snatched by the monster, Lockhart, taken into the Chamber of Secrets itself. Your moment has come at last. Lockhart blanched. That's right, Gilderoy, chipped in Professor Sprout. Weren't you just saying last night that you've known all along where the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets is? Well, I, sputtered Lockhart. Yes, didn't you tell me you were sure you knew it was what was inside it? Piped up Professor Flitwick. Did I? I don't recall. I certainly remember you saying you were sorry you hadn't had a crack at the monster before Hagrid was arrested, said Snape. Didn't you say that whole affair had been bungled and that you should have been given free rein from the first? Lockhart stared around at his stony-faced colleagues. I really never... You must have misunderstood. We'll leave it to you then, Gilderoy, said Professor McGonagall. Tonight will be an excellent time to do it. We'll make sure everyone's out of your way. You'll be able to tackle the monster all by yourself. A free rein at last. Lockhart gazed desperately around him, but nobody came to his rescue. He didn't look remotely handsome anymore. His lip was trembling. In the absence of his usually toothy grin, he looked weak-chinned and feeble. Very well, he said. I'll be in my office, getting ready. And he left the room. Right, said Professor McGonagall, whose nostrils were flared. That's got him out from under our feet. The head of houses should go and inform the students what has happened. Tell them the Hogwarts Express will take them home first thing tomorrow. Will the rest of you please go make sure no students have been left outside their dormitories? The teachers rose and left one by one. It was probably the worst day of Harry's entire life. He, Ron, Fred, and George sat together in a corner of the Gryffindor common room, unable to say anything to each other. Percy wasn't there. He had gone to send an owl to Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, and then shut himself up in his dormitory. No afternoon ever lasted as long as that one, nor had Gryffindor Tower ever been so crowded yet so quiet. Near sunset, Fred and George went up to bed, unable to sit there any longer. She knew something, Harry, said Ron, speaking for the first time since they had entered the wardrobe in the staff room. That's why she was taken. It wasn't something stupid about Percy after all. She's found out something about the Chamber of Secrets. That must be why she was... Ron rubbed his eyes frantically. I mean, she was a pureblood. There can't be any other reason. Harry could see the sun sinking, blood red below the skyline. This was the worst he'd ever felt. If there was only something they could do. Anything. Harry, said Ron, do you think there's any chance at all she's not... You know. Harry didn't know what to say. He couldn't see how Ginny could still be alive. Do you know what, said Ron? I think we should go and see Lockhart. Tell him what we know. He's going to try and get into the chamber. We can tell him where we think it is, and tell him that it's a basilisk in there. Because Harry couldn't think of anything else to do, and because he wanted to be doing something, he agreed. The Gryffindors around them were so miserable, he felt so sorry for the Weasleys, that nobody tried to stop them as they got up, crossed the room, and left through the portrait hole. Darkness was falling as they walked down to Lockhart's office. There seemed to be a lot of activity going on in it. They could hear scraping, thumps, and hurried footsteps. Harry knocked, and there was a sudden silence from inside. Then the door opened, the tiniest crack, and they saw one of Lockhart's eyes peering through it. "Oh, Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley," he said, opening the door a bit wider. "I'm rather busy at the moment, if you would be quick." "Professor, we've got some information for you," said Harry. "We think it will help you." Well, it's not terribly..." The side of Lockhart's face, they could see, looked very uncomfortable. I mean, all right." He opened the door and they entered. His office had been almost completely stripped. 2 large trunks stood open on the floor. Robes, jade green, lilac, midnight blue, had been hastily folded into one of them. Books were jumbled untidily onto the other. The photographs that had covered the walls were now crammed into the boxes on the desk. "Are you going somewhere?" said Harry. "Oh, well, yes," said Lockhart, ripping a life-size poster of himself from the back of the door as he spoke to start rolling it up. "Urgent call. Unavoidable. Got to go." "What about my sister?" said Ron jerkily. "Well, as to that, most unfortunate," said Lockhart, avoiding their eyes as he wrenched open a drawer and started emptying the contents into a bag. "No one regrets more than I." "You're the defense against the dark arts teacher," said Harry. "You can't go now, not with all the dark stuff going on here." "Well, I must say, when I took the job," Lockhart muttered, now piling socks on top of his robes, "nothing in the job description. Didn't expect..." "You mean you're running away?" said Harry disbelievingly. "After all that stuff you did in your books?" Books can be misleading, said Lockhart delicately. You wrote them, Harry shouted. My dear boy, said Lockhart, straightening up and frowning at Harry, do use your common sense. My books wouldn't have sold half as well if people didn't think I'd done all those things. No one wants to read about some ugly old Armenian warlock, even if he did save a village from werewolves. He looked dreadful on the front cover, no dress sense at all. And the witch who banished the abandoned banshee had a hare lip. I mean, come on. So you've just been taking credit for what a load of other people have done, said Harry incredulously. Harry, Harry, said Lockhart, shaking his head impatiently. It's not nearly as simple as that. There was work involved. I had to track these people down, ask them exactly how they managed to do what they did. Then I had to put a memory charm on them so they wouldn't remember doing it. If there's one thing I pride myself on, it's my memory charms. It's been a lot of work, Harry. It's not all book signings and publicity photos, you know. You want fame? You gotta be prepared for a long, hard slog. He banged the lids of his trunk shut and locked them. Let's see, he said. I think that's everything. Yes, only one thing left. He pulled out his wand and turned towards them. Awfully sorry, boys, but I'll have to put a memory charm on you now. Can't have you blabbing my secrets all over the place. I'd never sell another book. Harry reached his wand just in time. Lockhart had barely raised his when Harry bellowed, Expelliarmus! Lockhart was blasted backwards, falling over his trunk. His wand flew high into the air. Ron caught it and flung it out of the open window. Shouldn't have let Professor Snape teach us that one, said Harry furiously, kicking Lockhart's trunk aside. Lockhart was looking up at him, feeble once more. Harry was still pointing his wand at him. What did you want me to do? Said Lockhart weakly. I don't know where the Chamber of Secrets is. There's nothing I can do. You're in luck, said Harry, forcing Lockhart to his feet. On wand point, we think we know where it is and what's inside it. Let's go. All right. We'll continue on tomorrow at 9 in the morning. Join us then to see what happens as Harry and Ron and Professor Lockhart go looking for the Chamber of Secrets. Have a great day.